Lance is here. Good evening, everyone. Is there a problem?
What did you hit?
Did you break it?
Oh, I didn't. It's like you pushed something on your computer. You loaded a fan and a gas.
It was sitting right next to the microphone. Got your attention, didn't I? All right. I want to call to order the Contra Costa Transportation Authority board meeting for Wednesday, 17th, 2015, and ask you all to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All righty. Everybody turn their cell phones off. That was a good reminder. I was in a doctor's office this afternoon, and there were several of them went off right in front of the big sign that says no cell phones. So, okay, very good. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and I was just handed a speaker card for Kenji Yamada with Bike Concord. There's no agenda item, so I'm assuming that's for public comment. Very good. Come to the microphone, please. State your name and town for everyone.
Thank you, board members and members of staff. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. My name is Kenji Yamada. I'm here to represent Bike Concord. We are an organization of Concord residents working to make bicycle transportation safe and convenient in our community. We're eager to see the Transportation Authority dedicate more resources to the mainstreaming of active transportation in our county. We welcome and are prepared to spend considerable volunteer hours to support the authority's upcoming effort for a new county transportation sales tax measure. In order to ensure that this revenue, if the measure is approved by voters, will support the quantity and quality of infrastructure necessary to make active transportation mainstream in Contra Costa, not just a supplement, we ask that the authority commit to dedicate at least 15% of the measure's revenue to active transportation infrastructure projects. We learned at the community meeting recently held in Walnut Creek by Supervisors Anderson and Minchoff that the county still uses level of service as the primary engineering criterion for the design of roadways. This approach is not conducive to the goal of mainstreaming active transportation, as it privileges motor traffic flow through above other factors. It thereby encourages the continued dominance of single occupancy vehicle travel. Instead, we urge the authority to shift to vehicle miles traveled, a measure which integrates other transportation modes and directly encourages the choice of modes other than single occupancy motor vehicles. And I understand that the state of California is moving to that approach as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a minor comment. We appreciate your comments very much. We will take them all into consideration. I'm sure you are aware that the bicycle community is represented on our expenditure plan advisory committee, and they're very active there, and you're welcome to come and monitor those meetings as well. The other comment I would make is no decision has been made yet by this board whether to go forward yet with an expenditure plan and a measure on the ballot. We are still exploring that, so it is not a certainty. So there is a potential measure, but there is no decision made yet. So I just want to be extremely clear about that, okay? Because you referred to a definite, and it's not definite, okay? Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment under public comment on any item not on this evening's agenda? Seeing no one step forward, we'll close the public comment period, go to the approval of the minutes of the May 20th meeting. Any additions, corrections, or a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Motion by Tatson, second by Abelson. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is our consent calendar. Is there anything anyone wishes to pull for separate discussion or a motion?
Move approval. Second.
Motion by Romick, second by Butt. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? I think that carries unanimously. All right, very good. We are rolling tonight. Flipping on down my agenda to My God, there's 4 pages. Yes, I got there. Major discussion items. Item 3.1 is a new item, and this is the development of a transportation sales tax transportation expenditure plan and the appointment of additional members to the expenditure plan advisory committee. And our staff member on this is Ross Chittenden.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pierce, Commissioners. Again, Ross Chittenden, Deputy Executive Director for Projects with the Authority, and this is to continue our discussion of our exploratory discussions on the development of a transportation expenditure plan, and this item specifically is related to appointing additional members to the Expenditure Plan Advisory Committee, otherwise known as EPAC. I would draw your attention, you have a handout in your packet that identifies the proposed new members. There were some names that were identified since the packet was produced, so we wanted to get you the latest. And with that, and you'll actually see that one of the names added since the packet went out was Mr. Yamada. So that was a timely testimony that you just had here. You'll also see that there are a number of positions that are yet to be filled. We've identified those as to be determined. So we will ask for your approval to delegate authority to Chair Pierce to make interim appointments to the EPAC as the new names come up to fill those positions. And interim means that they would be able to participate in the next EPAC meeting, and then we would bring that name back to this body for consideration and full appointment at the next authority meeting. So before I ask you for your action, I'd like to just give you a quick update on some of the activities that are underway, both with the EPAC and some of the other groups we're working with. EPAC had its first meeting on June 3rd. We held it over at the Embassy Suites. It's a large group, as you can see. We now have 27 groups represented on the EPAC, so we originally intended to hold them in this room. It didn't really accommodate that size of a crowd, so we're meeting over at the Embassy Suites. I wasn't able to attend that first meeting, but Director Iwasaki provided an update at both the APC and the PC meetings last month, so if you were able to attend that, you got an update from him. If you would like additional information about that meeting, he or other members of staff that attended that meeting could provide more input. Overall, I understand the meeting was well attended. I believe all of the members appointed by then were in attendance, as well as many of the folks on the list you're looking at today who had identified themselves as candidates. They attended just so they could see the proceedings of that first meeting. The meeting itself was kind of an introduction and orientation for the group. Feedback I got was that the group is very enthusiastic. Individuals, I think, considered it an honor to be asked to serve on the group, and they're looking to dig in and provide their recommendations. The next meeting is scheduled for July 1st. That meeting will continue to orient the group and to set a course of action over the next year. Our plan at this point in time is that they're going to meet about once a month over the course of the calendar year, so there will be about 8 meetings scheduled between July and December. In addition to that, on the July meeting, they will be receiving project evaluations that are being performed by Martin and his team, and you'll hear a little bit about that later on the agenda when he discusses his items. August, September, and October are really the crunch months for the EPAC. They'll be receiving the inputs from the RTPCs. I'll give a little update on that in a second. And then have input from others. There's many other groups that wish to provide input to the EPAC. And then they'll be given an opportunity to talk about and develop the priorities for the projects and policies that they'd like to consider in a new ordinance and expenditure plan. We're tasking them to provide their recommendations to this board in October, at which time we will consider that input with the other input that we get, and our target schedule is to have what we're calling a discussion draft before you in November. Once we release the discussion draft, we will call together the EPAC once or twice in December and allow them to review and comment on that discussion draft. That is the extent of what we see as their involvement at this point in time. If there's any change to that, I will certainly update the board on that. And you can expect to receive a regular update here, including the minutes of the EPAC once they have had an opportunity to review and approve those. Some of the other activities that are underway to highlight real quick, I'm sure you were all busy working with your own RTPC on responding to our call for projects. Hisham has been very busy meeting with the RTPCs and the TACs to help organize that activity. Two of the RTPCs, WIC TAC and Transplan, have established subcommittees to address that, so they're meeting as well, and Hisham and others are helping with those. And again, the goal is that RTPCs provide their input on priorities by the end of July. We'll be receiving information from other stakeholders. Some of the folks that have reached out to us, the Public Managers Association has established a task force, so there's 8 or 9, I don't have the final list, of city managers that are interested in providing us input. Joe Sobrani of Pittsburgh is going to lead the charge on that, and he and I had a good discussion, and we both agree that the real path for them is through the RTPCs. So he will be working to have his group mobilized to try to establish a position for jurisdictions. Much of this relates to return to source, and advocate at the RTPCs for their input. I do believe that it'd be good for Joe or someone from that group to also address the EPAC when they have that information. The City County Engineers Advisory Council has established a task force. I'm going to meet with them tomorrow, and I think they'll be a good resource for the PMA group as they establish their ask. Transit operators, Peter and I had a good phone call this afternoon with the transit operators. I think some follow-up is needed there. Feeling from some of them that their voice isn't necessarily heard on equal par with some of the other stakeholders, so that's something I think we'll try to assist with, and something we can talk about with this group as things move forward. And then Randy has started his next round of what he calls his fireside chats. These are meetings with the city managers, public works staff, and the planning staff. And there'll be a couple of agenda items, but the TEP, I'm sure, will be the majority of the emphasis for the discussion during those meetings. So each month I'll give you some update on the progress with each of these groups. We'll be very busy and active over the next couple of months. So I guess I'd like to just stop with that and ask for your action to appoint the new members that are identified in your handout, and to delegate authority to the chair to make interim appointments. If you approve that action, just want to point out there is still one of the committees or categories identified in attachment A of your staff report that have yet to be filled, and that's public health. So we think we're close to having folks, but with your action tonight, we would have representation from each of the stakeholder categories with the exception of public health. So thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, sort of the question was, we talked about it last time, and I think David may have echoed this as well, was that there was one other category we thought might be important, which was we have large sort of office business centers. Some of them have been around for decades. Yeah. Bishop Ranch, Walnut Creek has a major center. Concord has a major center. East County, West County, and Richmond. And what I thought we were talking about was trying to find somebody, 1 or 2 people to represent those, because in fact, if we want to solve a lot of our transportation, we want people to live and work, and they have a lot of ideas, and they understand who's in those complexes. And if you look at the numbers of people that work in those, just those 4 places I mentioned, probably represents 1/3 of the jobs in Contra Costa County are in those centers.
Yeah.
And they have some significant issues of how people are being moved around. So I think it would be wise if we could add that category to get somebody from at least two of those, and maybe we get one from Central, maybe one from West County. I'm not excluding others, but I just mean in those large job centers that are office-oriented, because they're really intense users.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. We'll add that as a category and with consensus of the rest of the board, and start recruiting for someone to sit in there.
To some extent, the East Bay Leadership Council
Yeah.
already represents that group, but we'll take that. We're trying to keep the committee manageable.
Right.
It's growing quickly.
It's just a reminder, it's an area last time we didn't have, and I know East Bay Leadership, but getting, somebody identifiable in Bishop Ranch, one of the largest one, which employs in that area some 18,000 private, plus the two major employers, 30-something thousand people work there a day. Bishop Ranch has one owner, so I'm sure they might have an interest, and maybe somebody else that does so.
Okay, Gail, and then Dawn, and then David.
Ross, what is the procedure for integrating all these comments from the other agencies? Like you mentioned, the transit agencies wanted more involvement, the city managers. And do they all filter through the EPAC, or do they come separately to this board?
No, actually, it's a great question, and we're working on what we hope is a picture that communicates 1,000 words, whatever the saying is. So the ones you've represented there, we're trying to funnel them through the RTPCs. So the city managers, we want to have them make their ask through the RTPCs, because if you recall, last meeting we gave each RTPC a target. We're asking them to identify their priorities relative to that target, and we know that most of them we're actually encouraging them all to come in a little over so that we have some flexibility. We don't want to cut things out on the first step. So by and large, I'd call them kind of the public agencies. We're asking them to work through the RTPCs, and the EPAC is really more advocacy, but we do want EPAC to hear from the public agency. So that's why in August, I believe it is, we're going to ask each RTPC to come in and present their priorities to the EPAC, as well as a PMA. And idea we threw out today with the transit operators is that if they could elect somebody, or maybe it's all of them, I don't know, they could come in and articulate their needs with the EPAC. The transit operators, they're just that. They're the operators. The riders and the advocates, they're among a lot of the folks that are on the EPAC. There's a number of the representatives of the categories on EPAC really are the ones that are pushing for alternate modes of travel and increase in transit. So it's a little bit of both. You have the public agency operator who receives the funding. We're asking them to work through the RTPC. The user of the product, I think they're represented through the EPAC.
So AC Transit, BART should be making their pitch at the RTPCs?
AC for sure, and we're trying to schedule something with your staff at BART, a discussion of your staff with BART, because in addition to talking about our possible transportation expenditure plan, we want to chat a little bit about what you guys may be doing on the ballot as well, and how we make them complementary.
Like Julie said, we haven't made any decision at all.
I understand.
Nobody's made decisions, but a lot of people are exploring possibilities.
So
So,
good to talk.
yeah.
And then will all of this information come to this body as a whole?
Yes. This
Okay.
body is the. I don't want to quote a former president, but this body is the decider.
Yep. Okay, and I just have a comment, or maybe it is a question. I noticed some people on here whom I know, and they have no Contra Costa affiliation other than they are in an agency that we are interested in. It's maybe a little awkward to have people who don't live here or even have an agency that exists here to be giving us advice, because there's definitely an urban viewpoint and we're suburban out here. So I have a little concern about that.
Well, remember, we have many sides of this county, so not all of us are suburban.
I'm talking about inner core urban.
Yeah.
Not, our urban is not their urban, Oakland, San Francisco type.
I think the west part of our county would probably disagree with that very strongly. You know, Richmond, El Cerrito, those areas are definitely much more urban than we are out here. So we have a great diversity in our county. We're all represented. So, okay, very good. Don?
Thank you. So I think, the list is good, and I assume it will continue to grow. My question relates more to the following. As you said, each of these organizations is an interest group, so they represent a slice of the population. None of them represents all of the population. They don't represent equal proportions of the population, although obviously it's appropriate to give them equal voice on EPAC. How does the authority become, informed about what the general population wants us to do?
Yes, that was actually in my notes, and I skipped over that. Part of the update that you will receive in July would be our continued public outreach effort. As you may have heard over, I think it was last week, and tomorrow night we're conducting some focus groups relative to how we talk about technology. We're going to be planning some additional polling. Lindsay's putting together what I think you'll see is a pretty cool online tool that builds upon and expands the effort we did to collect direct public input under the Countywide Transportation Plan. So there's a number of avenues. We have just good old-fashioned town halls. So there's going to be a number of avenues where we're going to be testing the public opinion directly, and we'll be providing that summaries of that to the board here as well.
And that will come later this year and before we have to start putting a preliminary expenditure plan together?
Yeah, the online tool will be up soon. I don't want to commit to a date because I don't know what it is. But yeah, we will be collecting that information starting immediately. I don't believe we'll be doing the type of formal polling where we might be testing exact projects right away, but that's in the queue as well before we make this final decision that we haven't yet made, as the chair has pointed out. So yeah, that's we're going to be doing a lot over the summer, and then again after we have a draft TEP in January.
Thank you.
David.
Thanks. I now have three sets of things I want to comment on. So the first is I want to agree radically with Newell. While I have respect for the fact that too large a group becomes unmanageable and unworkable, we're probably already crested that threshold in some sense with 27 categories and 54 people if you include the appointees and the alternates. Having said that, I think we would do ourselves substantial harm if we didn't take into account the views of the significant job centers who really do have a voice and should have a voice in transportation. Frankly, a bunch of them have their own little buses and things that move people around. And if the transportation system as we know it was working and serving them, they wouldn't have them. So I think we can't sort of just blithely say we don't think that there's enough room for them. I think there has to be. Second, putting aside the urban versus suburban point, I think Gail's underlying point was the right one. That this is the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and our expenditure plan is for Contra Costa residents and people who work in Contra Costa. And I get that there are interest groups from all over who have an interest for a whole variety of reasons. Having said that, those who don't live and don't work in the county and don't necessarily have a strong representation in the county, it seems to me, create certain challenges because there are not necessarily viewpoints, even though some of the organizations will claim to speak for Contra Costa residents may not. And I think that's just a caution that we all have to be aware of. Popular or unpopular as that comment may be, there's a reality to it. The third big collective point I want to make is about public input. I think polls are good. They give you a sense of things, and they at least have a scientific base with a margin for error that you can factor in and count on. I like the online tool and other opportunities like that, but it's dangerous, in my opinion, to over-rely on them because there's a self-selecting component to it. And one can put way too much weight on the feedback you get with an online tool that people are self-selecting into. And it can skew results and perception. And I think there are multiple alternative avenues for the public to be heard. One of them is elected officials. We all do represent the residents of our communities, or else we wouldn't have been elected. And I think the RTPCs also serve that function because of the fact that it's not only representative of the electeds from those areas, but also the staffs who are much closer to the residents of our communities. And then, frankly, the last component is we have these meetings, which are public meetings. And as an opportunity, we're not televised, we're on the radio. And the residents from around the county should be encouraged to also come in and let their voices be heard here as opposed to through representatives that are either designated or self-appointed. But I just want to say I get nervous about over-reliance on self-selected representatives of the communities because it's just far too easy to jump up and down and say, I represent this contingency or constituency, and frankly, not have it be the case. So with all of that, I said it at the last meeting, I'll say it again, it's a big tent. We should bring, sort of get everybody in it who wants to be in it from every walk of life, every organization. If we have to rent an auditorium to get the feedback and the input, we should do it because that gives me a greater personal sense of the authenticity of the process than to be in the position of sort of limiting and allowing, if you will, self-selection, because all of these interest groups in one form or another are self-selecting. And my guess would be, for example, that there'd be some people from business who might think that whether it's the Trucking Association or the East Bay Alliance or whatever doesn't represent their interests, and folks should be invited to come and represent their own interests by cards, by letters, by phone calls, by emails, by any means necessary. Anyway, enough. I'm done.
Thank you, David. Janet?
I have several concerns, but maybe they've been all expressed, but I'll just briefly state them again just to know that they're my concerns also. And that is the absolute number of, I think it's 27 right now, of categories. And I'm wondering how viable that's going to be as a working group, because there's so many that are some people going to get heard and other people in that group are not going to get heard. So I'm wondering who is going to be leading the group and making sure that everyone is fully included from that group,
We have a facilitator, David Early, who did the facilitation last time and was very, very good, is doing it again this time, and they are working hard to make sure everyone is heard. And so far, none of these people are shy. So while the meetings may grow in length, they are dynamic, and I don't think there's anyone who is afraid of making sure that their views are heard. But from what I heard of the last meeting, and I only went to do the welcome in the first few minutes, and then I got out of their way so they could be on their own with the facilitators. But from what I heard, it was a very dynamic discussion, and lots of people are interested, and they're going to be very dedicated to participating. So they're going to bring a huge range of views to bear, and it's not like they're going to vote yes or no. They're going to try to come to consensus, and their opinions will be recommendations to us. They will not be they will be advisory only. So they hopefully will come up with a consensus recommendation, but there will probably be minority views as well, and I'm sure we'll hear about that as they come along. But we have a good facilitator.
I have another question, which has to do with the RTPCs and their due date of trying to get stuff in. I actually thought it was July somehow.
It
It
is.
is July.
It is July.
July 24th is the date we put
Okay, I
out.
thought I heard August mentioned in this.
No,
room a few minutes
August
ago.
is, August, we would ask someone from each RTPC to present their recommendations to the EPAC. So that, if we stay on schedule, that submittal, that package would be put together by the end of July.
Okay.
And it would come to us.
Okay, my main concern is that that's a really quick deadline, first of all, and yet with the advisory group, the EPAC, it's not until, I think I heard here tonight, October, the due date? So those seem out of sync, and is there any way to relax the RTPC deadline?
So that deadline came about by trying to marry our transportation expenditure plan timeline with the regional transportation plan timeline. So it's pretty much the same question. What are our priorities? And, we've been working on the countywide transportation plan for quite some time now, so I don't think we're starting from a blank slate. So, it's a lot easier to talk about your needs than to start talking about what are your priorities when we don't have enough money to cover your needs. So I get that. Considering that deadline, one of the things we're encouraging is that this first go-around, you kind of ease the size of the target a little bit, so come in over. So we don't have to make all the decisions in this first round. So if we gave each RTPC a target last month out of this board, and let's come in over, a little bit over, and then we can defer, doing that final reductions till later. So I think we're trying to get everything in sync, but we really need that input from the RTPCs, both for our input to put together our draft, but we think it's be very valuable to provide that to the EPAC. They may take it and say it looks great. They may take it and say we're going to throw it all out and do our own thing. We don't know, but I think it's all of our best interest to have a plan that was developed through an analytical process by professionals that we can provide them so they know where at least the transportation folks are coming from.
And Janet, I think the other thing that we need to remember is we're asking for potential marquee projects to be specifically called out. But as far as looking at how we put our last measure together, we're asking more for priorities of what are some of those other categories are, whether they are programs, whether they're things like that, and prioritizing some of those and assigning some dollars to those categories, but not specifically saying it's going to be XYZ within the category. So we're asking the RTPCs to be a little bit more general, except for some of the specific projects, which will feed into the regional transportation plan. And there they have to be specific.
And Chair,
And that eases the issues just a little.
And if I can add, I didn't provide the full detail on all the schedules, so we'll receive your input in end of July. We'll compile it through August. We'll have some presentations with the EPAC. In September, we'll be bringing to this board, and we can bring the RTPCs as well. It's basically what we've received. There's no kind of judgment or anything with it, but what have we received? Then we can start looking at what's common. Do we have countywide programs that are common throughout the whole county? What are the similarities? What are some of the uniquenesses that might be different from West County versus East County? So having time to compile that and then having another round of discussions with the RTPCs before this body produces what we're calling the discussion draft in November. So there'll be some time between when you each RTPC submits their priorities to see the entire county's picture, make adjustments if you want, and then.
In our own?
Pardon me?
In our own?
In your own.
Yes.
You said make adjustments.
Yes.
In adjustments in our own
You
region?
could make adjustments on your own, and then ultimately, this body will need to reconcile what we want to publish as a discussion draft in November.
Okay,
So
thank
we're
you.
getting there. Okay,
So it's-
Don, you wanted to respond to Janet?
Yes, to Commissioner Abelson, I had some of the same concerns last month when I saw this schedule. But if you look at the overall schedule, we do need to move quickly. And the other thing I realized is that if we essentially if the RTPCs have the first proposal, that sort of becomes what everybody else responds to. And since we are the ones who probably have the best sense of what the general public in our regions want, it struck me that we actually should take the first version, let EPAC respond to that as opposed to the other way around. So I came out being quite comfortable with this approach.
So the
recognizing
reason
it's
I'm
rushed.
kind of reacting, we actually have been trying to work on that in WCTAC, and what it sort of feels like to me is a staff document. It's not our document, and we haven't had time to make it, to do it the other way around, and that's what's kind of concerning me. Is the deadline, where we haven't had time to express anything. We're just reacting to staff documents. I won't say we're just reacting to staff. It's becoming very staffy, for lack of.
Well, hopefully in the next month or so, you can take their input and then you can refine it as the electeds giving the policy direction. So that's the intent anyway. We're all facing the same deadline, but as Don says, we're all in a tight one. So, okay, on to Dave Hudson and then Tom.
3 quick points. That the 27 is a large number, but I want to remind everyone, San Ramon did a general plan update with 32, 33 people, and it turned out to be a real good product. The point is, if you stay focused, you'll get a good product. If it just let's all talk, it will be just a lot of talk. David brought up a good point. It's better that they live in Contra Costa, but I would ask that we prioritize our feelings that they be from Contra Costa, but we leave it up to staff and this team to look at where the opposition, where the problem childs are going to be, because if we don't explain to them what we're doing and we find out the hard way that they didn't get the message right or something's wrong, then it's on us. We're the ones that are going to blow this thing. So I have a lot of faith in a team that's put together to realize, yeah, I want to be in Contra Costa too, but I don't want to kill this thing because I didn't reach out to the biggest thorn in the bush. And last, I want to point out that Gateway, the other business park we forgot to mention, went out of their way many years back to try and set up segways on the Iron Horse Trail. They've been looking at pedestrian bike for years. They get this transit livable community. Point being is, I would consider it a big mistake if we didn't add at least the business park influence, because they get where we're going, and a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I don't want to be detrimental to the bike community or even the transit community, but these business parks are not light year, but they're ahead. They know what's possible. They're out there looking around the world at what's possible, and they're implementing it. So I think that if something starts going in a direction that's not exactly where you'd want it to go without somebody speaking up, you'd have somebody speaking up. And there are a lot of capable people at these business parks.
Okay, Tom?
I'm a more the merrier advocate. I think the worst sin you can commit is to have somebody out there saying, we were not included, you didn't ask us, we didn't hear about this, that sort of thing. So I think that, I think all of you have done general plan changes, and we've had groups that are, 50, 80, 100, 1,000, you name it, and you work through it, and well, whatever, but a lot of people, yeah.
Or feels like.
Yeah, But at the end of the day, the worst thing you can have is somebody saying, why were we excluded?
Yeah.
So I think you're better to err on the side of inclusion rather than exclusion.
Okay. We're building a consensus here. Don?
So I would move the staff recommendation and ask staff and the chair to note the discussions tonight, which have identified some particular types of organizations that we think ought to be included on the EPAC.
Okay, I have a motion by Tatson and a second over here somewhere. Newell. All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ross. And we are now on to our regular agenda items. And that is a public hearing on our 2015-16 proposed budget. And Brian, you're going to kick this one off?
Yes.
All right.
Good morning, Chair Pierce and Commissioners. I am Brian Kelleher, the Finance Manager for the Authority. Thank you. Well, we started this process in February and March, and we brought it to the APC in May, and we also brought it again in June. Thank you to the projects team that also helped greatly with this. The projects team represents about 60% of the expenditures, but what we see here is the summary of all of the revenue expenditures for the 2015 budget year that we're in now and the changes for the fiscal year 2016. As we go through the sources, we have the revenues. The biggest one is the sales tax revenues. We're proposing that those be increased about 2.5% for next year. And as we look down at the federal, state, and local revenues, you can see some dollar changes there. The large one that jumps out at you is local revenues. That's a decrease of about $17 million. We'll get through, as we go through the other slides, some of the details in there. But that does not mean we're losing any funding for any projects. It's just the timing of stages in different projects. And with the Caldecott Tunnel finishing up and different stages of Highway 4 finishing, some of the RM2 money as well as the BATA funds are not going to be there. Oops. There we go. The next slide covers the historical view of the So this slide shows our historical sales tax revenues, and from 2011 to 2016, we show about a 27% increase. All right. It's not working. Oh, see?
For those listening on the air, we're having technical difficulties
Yes,
with our
sorry
slide
about that.
presentation, but I think it's back up.
This slide here represents the first 9 months of revenue of sales tax by the individual categories. As you can see up there, with the reduction in gas prices over the first 9 months of revenue collections for this year versus the previous year, we show about $500,000 less in gas taxes. Overall, year-to-year comparison, we're up 3.72%, which we're still showing increases in new auto sales. Retail stores are up. In previous discussions, it was questions were asked, how much does retail make up of the sales tax revenue? That's about 19%. New autos, about 12%. You can see those individual items there. This slide here shows historical sales tax revenues, as well as adding in the federal, state, and local, the additional grant funding for our capital projects. You can see that in 2014, we received about $79 million, as you all know, for the Caldecott Tunnel and State Route 4. As we're looking at projects in fiscal year 2016, we see a reduction, which is just due to the timing. We try and use all of our grant funds first to make sure that we don't lose any funding, and then rely on Measure J funding to bring up the other portions. This slide here shows a projection of the revenues. We can see that it decreased $16 million. As we discussed earlier, the RM2 funds are reducing $6,800,000. That's for the Caldecott SR4. BATA funds were reduction of SR4 160. And in other funds, we have about $4 million in there that we're going to be using on the I-80, which is the STIP funding. On the first slide, we had shown you different funding sources. We have the bond proceeds and other sources, and what I wanted to do was illustrate of $141 million of the Measure J projects we have there. We have the $40 million in grant fundings, and I wanted to show the disbursement of the funding by project. And then after applying all of the grant funding, we have about $101 million in funding that's necessary for Measure J. We will be using existing bond proceeds and be going out for another $100 million later this fiscal year or in this calendar year to supplement the funding for those projects. On the disbursement of the sales tax revenue, sometimes we use other sources to supplement the budget. We have other projects that are going on where we're having to dip into reserves. The reserves are funds that are earmarked from prior year savings that are allocated per the strategic plan to cover certain projects that are being completed. So in next fiscal year, we have the $82.4 million. I broke it down by categories per the strategic plan and the funding that's received and outlined the expenditures for each one of those programs. And as you can see in the Transportation for Livable Communities, right in the middle, we're using about $7.6 million in reserves and funds that we have collected since 2009. Also in Measure J, we will be using about $9.4 million in reserves, the funds that have been left over to complete some of those projects as well. This here shows the shift in the projects that we're working on. You can see that at the bottom, we're only increasing our capital project by about $2.9 million, but you can see that we're still wrapping up the construction part of the Caldecott Tunnel, collecting the invoices and getting some payments out next year. You can see that the BART Contra Costa Rail extension is a huge one that's increasing about $29 million, and a lot of that's going to be funded by Measure J funds. So we'll move on to the next. And then administration expenditures is about $2.2 million. We're only increasing that about $100,000. Salaries and benefits are about $700,000. We have the 1% cap for administration, and of that, we're going to use about 0.85%, which is below the limitation. We're going to continue the employee pay for performance program. The programs is increasing $2.3 million as sales tax revenue increases. So does our payments for a lot of the transit programs and other things as well. We have a lot of the TLC projects are starting to come to fruition, so we'll be making payments on that as well. Planning is increasing about $1 million. We have some large contracts in there, about $1.2 million for work on the outreach for the 2014 County Transportation Plan that we had just discussed. We also have some studies for the I-680 and West Contra Costa High Capacity. And then debt service will be increasing approximately $4.5 million should we issue another bond in the fall of 2015. That concludes my presentation, and we're here to answer any questions.
Before I take the questions from the board, I want to remind the audience that we will be opening the public hearing as soon as I answer questions from the commissioners. And then, so if you have comments that you want to make, please fill out a speaker card and turn that in to Denise right away. But we will be taking public comment in just a couple of minutes. So comments, questions? Don?
I would make a comment. As Mr. Kelleher said, the APC Administration and Projects Committee reviewed this budget twice in more detail in our individual reviews than here. The good news is that the authority is in good financial condition, and we are well positioned to at least meet, if not exceed, our promises to the citizens. And we also complimented Brandy and Brian on both the thoroughness and the clarity of what is very complex financial dealings, and unanimously recommended this to the board.
That's right. Thank you. Seeing no other questions right now from the commissioners, I'm going to go to the public. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Since we met, APC met, and Mr. Tatson's right, we really went over this. We scrutinized this pretty good, and we are in good shape. Obviously, it's a Brentwood person that helped bring that to attrition. But question, since Mr. Kramer came out and said things are going to change pretty dramatically in Contra Costa County, do you see that as a significant increase for us?
No, unfortunately or fortunately, we don't. Our revenue is not based off of property tax values.
Okay.
With the increase in property values, a lot of people may take out home equity loans, which may drive people to Home Depot and Lowe's and hire contractors and improve their housing, increase the sales tax for us.
So are we pretty conservative, right? That's where I'm getting. Are we?
Yes, in our sales tax projections, we're increasing them 2.5% for next year, whereas statewide, the State Board of Equalization, they're looking at about a 5% increase. So, and we've also used external consultants to do some sales tax forecasting for the next 15 years, or through the life of the measure. So we're in good position.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that what APC had felt the same as your comments, that we're in dang good shape, this organization.
Thank you, Bob. Newell?
I was just going to echo one point Commissioner Taylor just mentioned. And on the sales tax, we are pretty conservative on the estimating, and we always kind of look, there's three, high, low, medium. It's really important what you choose is based on what you've seen. And when you look backwards over the history of the agency and how we've done that forecasting, and truthfully, it's the most important forecast we do, because our return to source funds are based on that. Cities, all of us, the county, we all have budgets. We need to have confidence in the number that we're provided. And I think this agency does an exceptional job in that, in being conservative about it. And we've never gotten ourselves in a position where in that particular year we said, oh, we made a mistake. It's always been the right decision, well thought out, and this was done over several meetings. So I just want to echo that. I think that's the strength and the backbone of our agency.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to make comment on this year's budget. Anybody want to comment on the budget? Seeing no one even look like they want to rise, I will close
I would move that we accept the budget as presented and just add the compliment to staff. And it's kind of interesting to see Randy Carlton sitting over there. He's wiggling in his chair every time but he had a big smile at the end of the presentation. So I think there's a home run in the ballpark here. So thank you.
I have a motion by Arnrich, a second by Tatson. And any further comment by the commissioners? If not, all in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? That carries unanimously with those present. Thank you. All righty. On to item 4B12, which is the approval of the revised 2014 CTP work plan. And I believe Martin is probably going to take care of this one. Thank you, Brian. Brilliantly done. You knocked it out of the park. We're on a roll tonight. Great work, staff. Martin.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Martin Engelman, Deputy Executive Director for Planning at CCTA. And after that wonderful report, I hope my report is not too staffy.
I think Janet coined a new word.
So item 4B12 is approval of the revised work plan for the 2014 CTP. And this item lays out staff's approach to continued work on that project in response to additional comments received following release of the draft in August 2014. If you approve the CTP work plan, then the following two items, 4B13.1 and 4B13.2, would put into place the consultant resources needed to implement the work plan. I'll start with Part 1, the CTP itself, and then cover Part 2, the EIR, and finally Part 3, the resources needed to complete the plan. By way of background, the Countywide Transportation Plan, or CTP, creates a long-range vision for transportation, identifying the projects, programs, and policies that the authority hopes to pursue during the next 25 years. Preparation of the 2014 CTP update has been underway now for about 2.5 years. We've accomplished a lot. During 2013, the RTPCs completed updating their action plans for routes of regional significance. Each action plan includes quantitative performance measures and establishes a set of programs and projects needed to achieve those measures. We opened up the comprehensive transportation project list and received local input on every transportation project and program that is currently planned. And we developed a $12.4 billion list of capital projects and a $19 billion list of programs. We released the draft CTP back in August 2014, and in the fall, we implemented a comprehensive public education and outreach plan, asking, did we miss anything in the way of project and program ideas? And we had the KeepContraCostaMoving.org website open so that we could receive public input on the plan. In response to those and other comments, we initiated 2 corridor studies for congestion relief and transit improvement, one on I-80 and one on I-680. Last November 3rd, the comment period closed and we began preparing the final CTP for tentative adoption by the authority in March 2015. And at its last meeting in March, the authority decided to postpone that adoption and allow additional time to respond to comments. Also at that same meeting, the authority directed staff to initiate work on a transportation expenditure plan, or TEP, for possible consideration by the voters in November 2016. While the draft CTP combined and harmonized a variety of programs sponsored by different agencies using an assortment of funding sources, it did not include a financially constrained transportation investment scenario. With the authority's announcement that it's pursuing a TEP, still further integration is needed. We have to take that $12.4 billion project list and define investment options that could be constructed, assuming additional funds became available. In the case of a new 25-year sales tax, assuming we can leverage new funds as we have in the past, an investment scenario somewhere in the $6 to $8 billion range is plausible. So we have to narrow that $13.4 billion list down to $6 to $8 billion. Schedule-wise, to align the CTP with the TEP process, the draft would be reissued in coordination with the draft TEP in January 2016. And as Ross mentioned, the final TEP goes to the authority in May 2016. We'll have it ready for consideration and potential adoption in May 2016, and that is the same time that we would bring to you the final countywide plan. So the authority approved this proposed revision last May, and as shown on page 4B12.5 in your package, you can see the new dates. Given the schedule change, we're also looking at transitioning the approach and scope for the 2014 CTP so that it complies with MTC's updated CTP guidelines that were adopted by MTC in March 2014. Technically, since we started the 2014 CTP in 2012, only the previous MTC guidelines apply. Those were adopted back in 2000. However, given that we're now essentially restarting the process and moving adoption into 2016, we believe and the Planning Committee recommends that the authority transition over to the new MTC CTP guidelines, which I'll refer to as version 2.0. Attachment A to the board letter shows you what it means to apply Guidelines 2.0. Staff is confident that we can meet those new requirements, and we've spoken with MTC staff, and they are at the ready to help us to implement them. So we have to include a 10 and 20-year list of financially constrained projects and programs in the CTP, and that is going to be essentially our 2017 RTP list that we give to MTC in September. We will have to incorporate MTC's performance targets, which focus on greenhouse gas emissions, housing, air quality, safety, active transportation, and maintenance. And as Ross mentioned, we're working on that now. The analysis is currently underway. It's being reviewed by your CTP task force, which is a staff committee consisting of the RTPC managers and your planners and engineers. And they'll be looking at this on this Tuesday, June 23rd. We will incorporate the draft and final transportation expenditure plan into one of these transportation investment options that we evaluate in the CTP. We have to expand the equity analysis and evaluate how low-income communities are affected by proposed projects. And moving into Guidelines 2.0, we have to add explicit consideration of climate change and its physical impacts on the infrastructure. And finally, we'll have to beef up the complete streets and routine accommodation section by strengthening the linkage between the CTP and the countywide plan. So that's part one of my presentation. Part two is the EIR. The draft supplemental EIR for the 2014 plan was released back in the fall, and that plan evaluated different alternatives that emphasized different modes of travel, but it all essentially worked with that full $13.4 billion list of projects. The revised approach for this SEIR, Supplemental Environmental Impact Report, will be to evaluate graduated levels of investment options. Consequently, in parallel with the reissue of the CTP, we're going to reissue the draft SEIR. Furthermore, the supplemental EIR will be changed to a subsequent EIR to capture and address the more significant changes since the last time we did this back in 2009. And finally, we get to part three regarding the resources. 2 consultant teams are involved with this effort, Diet and Bhatia and Lamphere Gregory. The proposed amendments to their agreement are shown on page 4B 12.6 of your packet, and the next items 4B 13.1 and 4B 13.2 will address those amendments. Reissuing the CTP and recirculating the SEIR would cost $500,000, with $200,000 for the plan itself to Diet and Bhatia, and $300 for Lamphere Gregory to do a more comprehensive subsequent EIR. These are the same consultants that worked on the first draft, and we believe that their performance and comprehensive knowledge of the CTP warrants their continued engagement and would make for the most efficient completion of the work. This concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, let's try and take this in sections since we actually have 3 items here. So let's first address the CTP work plan and the revisions made to that to go along with the Guidelines 2.0, if you will, and adjusting the schedule for that. Any questions, comments about that? Concerns, heartburn? Questions, Newell?
Just a question, since I'm not on PC and you guys studied this. If you look at other counties that are doing this, are they similar in timeline? Are they saying, yeah, we're going to go back and redo ours? Is it, given how long ago we started this, 3 years ago, here we were almost to the finish line, making the change, wrap it up, move on. Is it really, Amy's here, is this really necessary? I mean, this is at least $500,000 plus another 6 months, and, is it accomplish us and put us in a stronger position, I guess is the question, relative to on a new expenditure plan, if we in fact go ahead and go for an additional sales tax to the voters, does it strengthen that position? Is that why it's being suggested? Because I'm not clear on that aspect. Why?
I think there are probably three answers to that. There's a planning answer, there's a legal answer, and then there's a political answer. I'll give you the political answer.
Okay.
The political answer, and I spent a good bit of time talking to both ABAG and MTC staff about this, about what exactly are the differences in the guidelines, and weighing with them how much more we'd have to do. They had seen our draft CTP that we had already. They said, you know, you're practically there, but you're still missing some big pieces. They offered their staff ability to help. They said, based on their experience with the last RTP and understanding the landscape in which we're working, they felt it would make it much stronger, especially since we're going back out for additional public comment. And we got quite a bit of additional comment, changing enough of what we had done that we needed to revise the plan. That it made more sense for us to go by the 2014 guidelines rather than the 2000 guidelines. And to me, that seemed like a no-brainer politically. I understand it's going to cost a little bit more. In the grand scheme of things, I think there are good, sound planning reasons and probably legal reasons why we'll have a stronger document. This will be part of what we submit to MTC, and while they understand when we started it, we could have gotten away with the 2000 guidelines, it's still a stretch.
No, that's what I thought, but I think the way you articulated it, that sounds very reasonable.
And so I don't know whether Martin or Mala want to weigh in on any of the rest of it. I think the political actually speaks for itself.
I'm good for that. The second part of the question is just, it's money. So the ask, Martin, is only $500,000. There's are there any other consultants? Because that's one 300 and one's 200. Is there anything else?
Well, the other consultant is the DKS team, and they've completed the action plans. The action plans are ready to be adopted.
We
have budget for that. That's all been approved. So there's not another consultant out there, to my knowledge,
And
that we have to add.
Okay, so $500,000
For the CTP.
For the CTP.
Not necessarily for the TEB. That will probably have an amendment coming forward soon.
And that's appropriate, because we don't know what it's going to look like completely, and you've got to respond and update.
Well, we've got to do the outreach process, and that's getting bigger all the time.
The last quick question is there, and I'm sold as to why we should do this, and it may strengthen us also in a better position to compete for matching funds and things like that, because we meet late standards. Any penalties in doing this by waiting? That we're pushing the state out? Is it going to hurt us in any way?
I don't see any. I mean, I asked MTC staff to very specifically, and I asked 3 different people on MTC staff, the planner, the deputy executive, and the executive director, as well as my ABAG staff, and they all felt it would make us much stronger as we go to compete.
Thank you.
Especially when we're looking at OBAG monies and things like that. Next speaker is Don, and then Bob.
So, thank you, Martin. So, and not very staffy at all.
Good job.
I noticed that one of the things that we will add as part of the 2014 guidelines is an equity analysis. And in your report, it says that MTC would make available the Plan Bay Area equity analysis. Given that one can interpret the words equity analysis in a variety of ways, is the MTC example clear enough that you have a pretty good sense of how to proceed?
Well, I think what we have from MTC is an equity analysis for the region, and we're going to have to focus in at the county level. But in order for MTC to develop the regional analysis, they did a county level evaluation, and that's what they would share with us, that information at the county level.
Okay. And then the second question, if I could just jump ahead very briefly to the EIR. In that same vein, as we update the EIR, are we going to be looking at the concept of environmental justice in the EIR?
I think that was a question for you.
Yeah, correct. That was a question for you.
Yes.
I would have to get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
I think in many ways that's kind of along the equity analysis stuff, but it has different, it has different definitions. And I would just suggest as well that many of the members of EPAC will probably give us feedback on some of this equity stuff that may help us to beef up that side of things. Okay, we'll go to Bob and then to Dave Hudson.
I guess the question I ask, Martin, how often do we do this?
Typically, it's every 4 or 5 years. We did it in 95, we did it in 2000, 2004, 2009, and this is the 5th plan. Julie's been here for every one of them.
Well, I haven't, and so I guess the next question I ask, have we progressively gone up? Do you remember what we spent the first time? And now we're up to $500,000 this time? Do we ever fall back?
We fell back, yes. For the
Really, Bob?
For the 2004 plan, we spent a lot because that was synced up with Measure J, and so we had actually transportation scenarios options in there for different expenditure plan. But
You
then
said-
it
Mark,
did
you
go
said-
down in 2009, and now it's coming back up.
You said we spent a lot. What's a lot?
I don't recall what
Oh,
the number
okay.
was.
You'd
But-
have to put them all in common dollars,
Right,
though,
but you think we're in better shape? Is MTC going to do a lot more changing?
Oh, look at her, look at Julie.
Changing in terms of, cut your mic on for me, and then I'm done.
I will tell you, the good news is that since both of these consultants were engaged and procured through the federal process, that $500,000 is eligible for federal reimbursement, and we should be able to get 87.5% federal dollars from MTC to do this.
Exactly, yeah. Okay. Amy, I think he asked you a specific question. Is MTC going to be changing the guidelines significantly? And we've already done the changes, so we're responding. If you have any other.
Yeah, no, I think they're going to be consistent. I mean, there's always a natural evolution. I don't see it significant. I think the first round was really the largest, and it's just, you want to keep it.
4 years from now, we're not likely to change them a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well, we
I
hope
mean, I
so.
think
We
you
hope we
build
learned our
you
lessons.
build on them, and I think just, for example, the fact that we're going through this robust process at our county level, is a reflection of the fact that we're consistent with the, efforts to keep the, address these issues regionally as well as locally. So yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Amy. Dave Hudson and then Chris.
Yeah, I think earlier in the presentation you mentioned that there's climate action or some kind of planning in this EIR. If there's climate action, there has to be environmental justice. It's tied to it. It's going to be in there, whether it's accepted or not. But not social justice, but environmental justice. It's back through 32, and it's going to be in there.
Chris.
Yeah, just a comment. FTA, Federal Transit Administration, has come out with major new guidance on environmental justice, and I think FHWA is adapting part of that for FHWA. So to the extent there's federal money, there are new environmental justice rules that are quite specific. Transit agencies have to worry about that a whole lot, but I think you guys have to worry about it a certain amount because there's pieces of federal money in a lot of what you do.
Okay, if there's no other comments, are there any comments from the public on this item, which is 4B12, the revisions to the 2014 CTP work plan? If not, do we have a motion?
I'll move staff recommendation.
Motion by Hudson, a second by Durant. Any further comment? If not, all in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That carries unanimously by the members present. Thank you. Okay, on to the EIR scope, schedule, budget. That's the first part of it is for the Diet Boccia completion of the CTP and
You need a motion?
consultant.
I'll move
You want to move
approval
both
of Amendment
consultants?
2, Agreement 324 with Diet and Boccia.
Okay.
They would include the amendment in their handout today on the dais.
Right. Okay, so I hear a motion from Hudson to approve the 2 consultant agreements and with the amendment that's in the handout today. Is that correct? Okay, and the second was Newell? Okay, so we have a motion by Hudson, a second by Arnrich. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain. That carries unanimously by those present. Thank you very much. All righty, we're racing along here. Good job, Martin, and not too staffy. Good job. I think Janet has coined a new name, new word here. Exactly, just staffy enough. All right, we are into correspondence and communications. You have several letters in your packet, and I think there might be one in your handout as well. Maybe not. I will just indicate for the record if I'm not seeing it here. We did get a response from Caltrans on our request for some supplemental funding for one of our projects for which they theoretically are responsible, and they said, sorry, we're poor, we don't have any money. So we'll continue to pursue other avenues and ways to apply pressure. That was trying to be diplomatic. Okay. Associated committee reports are...
Wait,
I'm sorry.
On 5.3, I just would ask as a matter of disclosure, Randy, that last sentence in the first paragraph, nor will they be making reimbursements for ongoing projects. Does that affect us? How does it affect us? Does it have anything to do with us?
Federal Highway Trust Fund.
So thank you for asking the question. So the analysis that we have so far is when we're looking into it, is we may have some issues with some OBAG. It's all federal money, and so most of it could affect San Pablo Dam Road, which we're going to advertise here very shortly. That's a federalized construction contract with a federalized construction management contract. And then we have some OBAG grants that may be in jeopardy. So we're taking a look. Hisham is there, and so he's got the point on analyzing. Do you have any further information on the impacts of that? What you're asking is if the Highway Trust Fund goes insolvent, what are we going to do?
So the San Pablo Dam Road project has $17 million in federal money. If they could not, we don't anticipate seeking reimbursements until the end of the year for those monies, but if this goes on long enough, we will have basically to front our own money to do the project and wait for reimbursements. There is about $12 million in OBAC projects programmed in this fiscal year. These are projects that are developed and being done by your jurisdictions. Again, this could jeopardize getting your authorization to obligate, or if you're obligated already, to be reimbursed on time. And there is also one more project, the I-80 Central, a couple $1 million in federal earmarks that could be impacted by this, by the trust fund.
So, Commissioners, what Hisham is saying is we have the finance group taking a look at how much we can loan ourselves, if you will, or loan on the federal side so that we don't stop any construction, because that's the last thing that you want to do, right, is stop construction. So when it goes into construction, we'll have a plan to make sure that construction continues, but then we'll seek reimbursement at a later time. But as Hisham has said, it's not until the end of the year that we have an issue. And the Surface Transportation Bill extension expires at the end of July. So there's some time. They're going to have to fix this problem anyway, so it may or may not have any issues. But Plan B is we're going to look at loaning ourselves the dollars. We'll come to you for that authority.
We're not the only ones in the United States who are concerned about this issue, so they'll probably pass another 2-month stopgap and then have to go back to work. But the good news is the governor at least is looking at it on a statewide basis. We'll see where that goes. All right. The next item is Commissioner and staff comments and reports. I would just report to you, and Amy may have something to add. In recent discussions with both our ABAG and our MTC staff about how we accomplish the outreach for the next round of Plan Bay Area and how we work with the local jurisdictions from the regional level, there has been a lot of suggestion that some of the work devolve to the CMAs to do a lot of the planning area work. And I have been pushing back rather strongly, saying, I don't think my CMA really wants to get into the land use side of things. But it will be a discussion that will be coming up. So kind of start thinking about that in the back of your head, whether that's a mission creep that we think we really want to take on at this level. It may be appropriate, it may not. My instinctive reaction was to protect our small staff from too much overload. But, you know, it's a discussion we're going to have, I think, because I think that's the way things are headed. And we may be able to head it off at the board level, but I'm not counting on that right now from what I'm hearing. So that's just sort of an update. Amy, anything you've got from that level?
Well, just to kind of add additionally, I mean, I think part of the thought process in that is recognizing the fact that some of the counties that have been able to do some of the planning locally around things like housing, like some of the San Mateo County, for example, have been able to successfully fulfill their requirements, recognizing you've got a diverse set of cities within a county. But as Julie said, I think it'll be a ongoing discussion involving both boards as well as the CMAs around the county, and really what is it that the CMAs want to do in terms of, having sort of local control, but also, as Julie's mindful of the fact that we have a pretty clear mission and a staff that's defined in that context. So I also think, though, that this I guess ties in with what we're just saying, is that last week, was it a week or two ago, we had a meeting with the Northern Waterfront Group, and I want to thank CCTA for making the facilities available. Julie and I both brought out our MTC and ABAG staff to really talk with that group on the kinds of resources that are available in terms of future funding, future initiatives that, and I think we concluded after that meeting that those initiatives, because they represent a broad base of cities and business and organizations, have the potential for generating grants from the region and federal and state grants, particularly in light of the cap and trade revenue. I think we need to be strategic in Contra Costa County to identify, where are the opportunities that we have to, receive more of those cap and trade funding. So I just want to thank staff. I thought it was a very productive meeting.
Right. Dave, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I normally try and stay away from this League of California, transportation, public works, communication, whatever we are. But sometimes you get things that just, the little flags go up. One was AB 400 Aleo, changeable message signs on the freeway. And we have an assembly member that wants to use those signs like on Highway 80 to say, you can register to vote, turn right at the next exit. We went ballistic. I mean, and his representative was there too. He was not treated kindly, though 3 or 4 people actually wanted it. It was to many of us the camel's nose under the tent. Where do you draw the line? And I really got mad when I thought about how much money we spent for those things, so they can start advertising on them. Another one was bus waits. We've been arguing about that for I don't know how long. The Trents and the League of California Cities came up with a pretty good plan, unladen weights, $25,000 per axle in 2016, 24 in 2018, 23 in 2020. A subcommittee from Transportation, Public, they wanted to change it to 23,000 next year, 22 and 21. I'm not on their Christmas list. I said, why don't you just do a D&E and get to 21 by going 22 in 2022 and 21 in 2024 and give these people a chance. I don't think Gillig is interested in fooling around with these things when they got an 800,000 square foot building they're trying to build in Livermore. The rest of the people bought it, so hopefully it gets through and we can end this thing. Bus waits, giving tickets to bus drivers, not a good thing. Another one was, and this is coming, I don't know how if we want to get too involved with it, but it was on a transportation, public works. It looks like the state is going to go after a comprehensive storage water plan, something John Nedgley Sr. was talking about 20 years ago and went on task force with him. And very interesting that I think there's a pretty good reservoir over in the Pittsburgh area, but if they get into it and they're talking about licensing, permitting, start controlling groundwater too, it could get nasty. And then the last one, I gave a copy to Mala. She's aware of it. I won't go to it in depth, but it scares the snot out of me. Pasadena versus Mercury Casualty. In 2011, they had some big windstorms down south, and it blew over 5,500 trees in Pasadena. One landed on a house. The owner of the house got $294,000 back, and then Mercury Casualty sued Pasadena and won on inverse condemnation. And this thing could get ugly. Very, very. This tree was pruned in 2005 and 2010. It was maintained. But that wasn't good enough for the judge. Well, how did that maintain to keep it from falling over? So this, I'm sitting here looking at all the works where we plant trees. As far as I'm concerned, don't plant any more trees. This is not pretty. If you want to take a look at it, I got a copy of it. I gave it to Mala. I don't want to go to any more of those transportation meetings. You go to the next ones.
Unfortunately, they're on the same day as MTC meetings, and I think you'd rather have me at the MTC meeting.
They don't want me back there anymore after that.
No, you got to go. You got to go. All right, Chris?
Yeah, three things. A couple of weeks ago, the AltCar conference, which was the last few years at the Craneway Pavilion, was at Oakland City Hall. Interesting conference. I got to drive a Toyota hydrogen car, a Honda hydrogen car, a smart electric car, and a Nissan Leaf. It was sort of fun. We had one of our buses there. My agency and I have been participating quite actively in the zero-emission bus rule that's happening out of CARB. You should know that at least the discussion draft that they put out about a month ago says that they are planning regulations that says all buses will have to be zero emission by 2040, which means beginning in 2028, all bus purchases will have to be zero emission. I know we've got our hydrogen program. I know that Walnut Creek has an electric bus program along with Gillig, and I wouldn't be surprised if they would come to you with that, but that's something in terms of very long-range planning that is going to take a whole lot of money, and we need to know that. The last thing is that for the past 4 days, AC Transit has turned into the Warriors Parade Planning Agency. I don't think we've done anything but that. The agency is going to close on Friday because we figure nobody will be able to get there, but you are all invited to come to Oakland for the Warriors Parade. They're expecting between 500,000 and 1 million people. The same people who put on the Giants Parade are putting on this parade, and they've spent days with us, with our scheduling folks and our planning folks, planning all our detours and all that stuff. And it's all on the AC Transit website if you want to figure out where your favorite bus is going.
Thank you, Chris. If there are no further commissioner comments, we will go to our executive staff comments. Randy.
Thank you, Chair Pierce. Commissioners, first of all, I want to thank the Team Contra Costa Transportation Authority. They're working very, very hard and doing all these different things with CTP, TEP, and all the other acronyms. And we've still got to deliver the capital program and all the commitments we have to our partners. And so there's a lot of work going on at the authority on a daily basis and sometimes on the weekend. So I appreciate all the work that they do. The third item on this, the young man that's into bicycling active transportation program, I only highlight this, and I've said it once, and I apologize to those at the admin and project committee meeting because I mentioned this, but we had asked for $2 million for ATP money from the MTC, and I didn't get a phone call, but they cut our project because they only had about $600,000 left. Went and funded another project in another city in another county, and so I called the executive director at MTC, and he said, well, you asked for $2 million. I said, but we could use $682,000. because all we're doing is we're taking measure money and moving it on to phase 2, and phase 2 of San Pablo Dam Road is $60 million underfunded. And so this means if we got $1 million, we would only be $59 million underfunded. But the point is we can use it. This qualifies for it. And so Steve gave us $682,000, and we thanked him. We didn't argue, and we didn't, say anything else. And then the other day we get another $3.674 million because some other areas can't deliver their projects. And so it's always good to have great partners. And so thank you to Steve Heminger and his team for seeing that we have pretty good projects here in Contra Costa. And so that's another almost $4 million. Stephanie, who has been here for 6 months, she's passed probation. As I mentioned before, that's the next item, ATP Cycle 2. It's complex, it's difficult, and so we've taken our consulting staff, Paul Fassinger and Stephanie, and they work together to try to streamline the process of making applications because it's very technical, and we want to make sure we only have to do it once. And so we're taking on that workload, so thank you very much, Stephanie, for that. I know she gets all embarrassed when I say her name, but you better get used to it. Investor Roadshow, I highlight this for a couple of reasons. One is we made a tape to talk about why it's important and why it's great to invest in Contra Costa Transportation Authority bonds. And so we were scheduled to go out here very shortly. You approved that at the last meeting that we can pull the trigger when interest rates drop to the right number. Today we're at 55 basis points. That's what Randy always says. I asked him really what that means. He said 0.55%. Our current bonds are 37 basis points or 0.37%, so there's no sense in calling them yet. But we're ready to go between now and December 15th, and so that Investor Roadshow is ready. And Brian Keller has already highlighted the fact that we're going to go out and sell another $100 million in tax-exempt municipal bonds fixed-rate notes because we're getting low on funds to fund our construction program. We did attend, several of us attended the CT, California Transportation Foundation's award luncheon. Jim Frazier, Assemblymember Jim Frazier. Well, it was cute. So Jim was honored as elected official of the year, and he got rather emotional when he got up to talk about the acceptance speech. So that was pretty neat. And then the largest attendees that packed the room at the CMA awards banquet because, and I like to say this, I don't know about you, Ross, but Ross and I were co-MCs, so maybe they wanted to see how crazy we got. No, we told them no taping and no reporting back, but it was well attended, and at least I was laughing at Ross, but it was fun. I did meet with, Lindsay and I met with Assemblymember Catherine Baker. She's into transportation. She wants to know how she can help in her region and beyond, and so we're going to engage her help if we need it. I was asked to give the keynote speech again at the ITS Canada's meeting. The last time I spoke, and I started my speech by saying, I have a technical question to ask all of you here in Canada. Do you have any Canadian hockey teams left in the Stanley Cup Finals? And they didn't. And I said, I'm not saying that the United States teams are better than the Canadian teams or anything like that, but the last time I went, the Canucks lost the Stanley Cup Finals, and they rioted, turned cars over, and you got locked into the hotel. So my point to them was, if you're as passionate about hockey as you would, or if you're passionate about deploying ITS as you're about hockey, you're going to have no problem in Canada in the future because you guys go crazy over hockey. And CSAC, Jack Hall, they thought that was funny, by the way. Hopefully I get invited back. The CSAC meeting, I couldn't make it, so Jack made the presentation, and we're getting a lot of requests on Gomentum Station, redefining mobility. I was asked to give a speech or present that at Oakley City Council meeting. We're going to meet at Black Bear Diner before the meeting. That's Commissioner Romick's favorite place, so I'm going to join him there. And then we're going out to the city of Brentwood and doing the same discussion, so we're available for that. We did have our first EPAC meeting. I think we've presented that enough. We don't need to give you an update. I can if you want. And then the last is we had a technical focus groups meeting, and it was interesting. 20 people, 10 elderly, I'll say my age, 10 younger, I will say Lindsay's age. And it was amazing that they brought up the Naval Weapons Station, they brought up self-driving cars, the older group, they brought up safety features. They were enthralled about technology and how it relates to safety. They did talk a little bit about BART, connectivity to BART. The younger folks really were more into the vacuum cleaner that drives around by itself and things that make their lives easier, right? Nest that you can set your thermostat, so it's cold when you get home or warm when you get home, depending on what you like. And so it's a weird contrast. And so we've taped that, and that's available. Is that correct? It will be available. And so if you want more information, if you're interested, Lindsay can come up right now and kind of give you a brief synopsis if you want to hear that right now. Are you ready to do that, Lindsay? Okay, all right. All right, so I'm available. Does anybody have any other questions on any of these items? I stand ready to answer them. Okay, I'm finished. Thank you.
Awesome. Yes, Randy has been very, very busy. So, and he's in high demand around the world. So, all right. Included in your packet is the calendar for the next quarter, July, August, September. We are dark the month of August for all committee meetings. EPAC will probably be meeting, but the rest of us are getting the month of August off. So staff can actually get the work done instead of preparing packets and doing meetings for us. We have the calendar of upcoming events. If there is nothing else for the good of the order, we stand adjourned. Thank you all. See you back here on Wednesday, July 16th.